So we're going to look at the bottom of page 31. This is the last Midrash that comes in the that I presented the category of war and peace, and what was the rabbi's political stand regarding armed struggle against the enemy. And we have before we read the story, let me ask this question: have you visited Masada? Any of you? You all visit Masada, right? It's a must. You have but when you go to Israel, you know it's a sort of a pilgrimage. Not to miss. You have to see Masada. It's a major part of the narrative of the state of Israel. There's a phrase: "Shenit Masada lo tipol." Masada will not fall again. This is like the Los Alamos. It's like the fort that stood till the last minute, till the last moment, and with all this. So the question is, how many times do you think Masada is mentioned in rabbinical literature? More or less, in the dozens, in the single digits.
5.
Okay. Any other guess?
I'd say it's not.
It's not. Any other guesses? Yeah, it's 0. Not mentioned at all. So why would that be? So when I started contemplating the issue, I said maybe it's because the fighters at Masada committed suicide, right? What they did, that they kept fortifying the walls, and when finally the Romans were able to build a battery high enough to roll the ramming machine to go into the walls, they built a double wall behind it and filled it up with the dirt. So the more the Romans rammed the walls, the stronger, the more packed this dirt became. But they knew the end was near because more and more soldiers were going up the ramps. They were just outnumbered. So the last night before the walls were breached, the commander Eliezer gathered everyone and he said, "We're not going to be captured by the Romans, and we're going to commit suicide." And so they killed each other until the last standing person killed himself, and that was it. So the Romans were denied this sweet victory because they basically conquered a fortress filled with dead bodies, except for 2 women who escaped and told the story. And that's how we know, like we actually have sort of a transcript of the speech that he gave in Masada. It's documented in Milhamot HaYehudim, the wars of the Jews of Josephus. So we know that they all committed suicide, and so it seems maybe that's the reason it's not there. So let's look at the story from the Talmud in Masechet Gitin. מעשה ב-400 ילדים וילדות שנשבו לקלון. It so happened that 400 boys and girls were captured, typo here, for purposes of shame. Irgishu, meaning that they were going to become sexual slaves. Irgishu b'asman l'mayim mitbakshim, they realized what were they requested to do, or why are they being taken back to Rome. Amru, im anu tovin bayam, anu ba'in l'chayei ha'olam haba. They said, if we drown ourselves in the sea, will we have a share in the world to come? Well, they're debating, because if one commits suicide, it's a sin. So will they have? So is it better to sacrifice their life or die or live a life of shame? Darash lahem agadol shebahem. The eldest interpreted for them the verse. So the word is darash. It's sort of a midrash, seeking the meaning of the text. Amar Hashem, mi Bashan ashiv mitzulot yam. I will bring back from Bashan, which are a mountain range in the Cisjordan. I will bring back from the depths of the sea. Elu shetovim bayam. The depths of the sea. Those are the ones who drown in the sea. Kevan sheshamu yeladot kach, kafzu kulan venaflu letoch hayam. Once the girls heard that, they all leapt and fell into the sea. Nasu ילדים קל וחומר בעצמם ואמרו. The boys reasoned with a fortiori argument. מה הללו שדרכן לכך כך, אנו שאין דרכנו לכך על אחת כמה וכמה. If those whose ways for this so, we whose ways not for this even more so. They also leapt into the sea. So I'm sorry about the translation, but in the Hebrew, like, it's all like Talmudic. There's a Talmudic argument here. And this is an interesting point in the story. Why does it have to be presented in the way of a Talmudic argument? We have two elements of the Talmudic argument. First, it starts with Darash, right? The eldest was Doresh, and is not Doresh in the agadic sense, is Doresh in the halachic sense, because they are asking a question of halacha. Are we allowed to commit suicide or not? And he answers with the Drash, Midrash Agada, where he derives the meaning of or the halachic requirement from the text. And the second element of the Talmudic dispute that we have here is the fortiori, or it's called Kal Vachomer, where they say, oh, if the girls did that, even more so us, the boys. What is this Kal Vachomer? They mean that it's more normal for girls to become to be captured for these purposes, and less so for boys. So since if they are not willing to accept it, we definitely are not supposed to accept it, and they committed suicide. So in a way, the women here are praised for taking the first action and leaping into the sea. So why do you think we have this kind of Talmudic language in what is supposed to be? So because I don't think that if the story happened as it happened with could have happened that people committed suicide. We don't know if the whole ship, hundreds of kids did that. But do you think there really was this kind of a dialogue? So why is it presented in such a way? Why not just normal narrative? And there are also stages in this.
The rabbis are working out the issue of elective suicide.
Yes.
Versus a different kind of sin.
Yes.
Right? Being subject to a different kind of sin. Although there's certainly other possible arguments on whether it's voluntary, involuntary.
Yeah.
The decision, they don't know how they're going to be treated. That you don't know. But if they make a decision to kill themselves, that was a premeditated decision. That's
right.
accidental.
Right.
So this could get into a whole, tangent on that. But
so these are the rabbis talking. You're saying
that's how it seems. And based on how we've been reading these so far, trying to pick this up.
I think I think it's true because it's what the rabbis reflect their.
For example, why 400?
Yeah. 400 is
specific. You're telling a story. You're like, oh, there were some boys and girls.
Right.
And this is what happened to them.
Right. 400 is a we call it typological number. It's a lot. It's a number. Yeah, number that means a lot, but also it is mentioned a lot in the context of the destruction. The measurements of it were 400 by 400 and stuff like that, or 500 by 500. But these are they're called typological numbers. The same as 10 and 7. There's certain units that are used at 13,000, 12,000, all kind of numbers. So yes, so we have that, and I think probably this is the possibility that the rabbis were really debating it, and they take their debate in the Midrash and they work it into a story, which probably happened. I'm sure that there were, that when slaves were kidnapped in Africa and brought here, they really didn't have a chance to be on board the ship, and it's very probable that over centuries, pirates and mercenaries passed information to one another, and they said, "Don't let slaves on deck because you're going to lose them." Because most slaves would choose to try to either to swim away to freedom or to commit suicide. So it already became the norm that you have to put them at the bottom of the ship. So this probably happened, or at least a grain of the story, not 400, not arguments on the ship, but it did happen. And the rabbis break it into this theological argument when they say people are going to come and ask, should I commit this elective suicide? And the answer is yes. Now, why? I would say even, that would be a little midrashic, but why would the author say of the story, why does he have to bring the full pasuk? Mi bashan ashivim tzulot yam. It's not really related. They could have used only the first half, the second of the pasuk, ashivim tzulot yam. I bring back from the depths of the ocean. So I think the possibility that Bashan in Tanakh represents was the kingdom of Og, and later on the some of the tribes of Israel, and what Bashan was known for was promiscuity.
So the rabbis feel that what happened on Masada was justified, that the people did the right thing.
We would have thought so, because they're not against suicide.
Right. Because it's different. Like Rabbi Shofet always says in his classes, if someone's holding a gun to your head and says, eat this bacon cheeseburger, you eat the bacon cheeseburger.
Right.
But I think this is committing idolatry.
Not if you're vegetarian.
Things, right?
Not if you're vegetarian. If you're
If
if you're vegetarian, you die and not eat the burger.
Can we do it dead?
Probably not. But
Do what?
He said, what if it was a water gun?
But, it seems like the rabbis were fans of martyrdom.
Right. At least.
I don't know
No,
if
in
they
this
were
case,
fans.
though,
I think
it's
they're trying to
different.
find.
Why is it
They're trying
different?
to back into.
Because they would have had to commit.
justification.
They would have had to, I think, commit idolatry. I think there's like one or two or three reasons as to why, as to the understanding or it being justified for killing oneself. Either, what was it, Eric? Idolatry. What was the other reasons?
Murder and incest.
Right.
Incest.
Right, or forbidden sexual relationships.
Right.
Even though that would not be forbidden, it would be promiscuous, but not forbidden in the sense of incest. But I think maybe they were thinking of a pasuk. There's a famous pasuk in Amos 4:1, where he speaks about the cows of Bashan. I think it crept also into Christian theology. I wonder, because I think I cows of, yeah. You see, I'm even my search engine was in Hebrew, and I just wrote, the parallel letters to cows, and it gives me cows of Bashan. Hear these words, you cows of Bashan, who are in the modern of Samaria, who oppress the poor, who crush the needy. I want to see if people use it in a spiritual one. Yeah, it became sort of a catchphrase. It's of an idiom. And then it says in Amos 4:2, it says. But anyway, he speaks about the promiscuity of the parot Bashan, of those cows of Bashan. So when they bring the full pasuk, and God says, "I will bring you back from Bashan. I will bring you back from the depths of the sea." It's insinuated God will save you from promiscuity, from this terrible sexual sin, and will bring you back from the depths. So the rabbis are debating the Bet Midrash, and then people ask, should we or should we not? And they say, what are you trying to save yourself from? If you're saving yourself from death, like you said already, Stephanie, then definitely you're allowed to do that, because you don't want to die. If you are demanded to commit idolatry or adultery, or to kill another person, then you have to sacrifice your life. And if not, you should not do that. So in this case, they say those kids or those young men and women on the ship knew that they're going to towards a life of slavery and torture, and probably also sexual abuse. Who knows where it would lead later? So they contemplate the question, and they rationalize it, and eventually they come to a conclusion. So it is a Talmudic discussion disguised as in a story. And the truth is that even what you quoted, the famous the famous statement of Yahareg Val Ya'avor is written originally. It's in Masechet Sanhedrin. I think it's Daf Peidalet. Wait 1 second. Nimnu vegamru. Once again. So in Masechet Sanhedrin, we have this discussion whether one should sacrifice his life or commit the crime, and they ended up by saying that Yareg Val Ya'avor. But it wasn't a simple decision. Not everybody agreed. First of all, you had a dissenting voice, that of Rabbi Ishmael, who said that you do not sacrifice your life for idolatry, right? Which actually makes sense, because idolatry is an offense against God, and God knows that you're not really doing idolatry. So there was a minority opinion. It was overruled. But anyway, it's not 84, it's 74. Sanhedrin 74:1. The Talmud says, Nimnu vegamru. How did they arrive at this decision of kill yourself only if you are required to commit idolatry or murder? It is presented with those two words. The rabbis were gathered in a place called Aliyat Bet Natza in Lod, and it says Nimnu vegamru. So Gamar is the verdict. They arrived at the decision. What does the word Nimnu comes from? Where does it come from? It comes from the Hebrew verb mana, like minyan. Also to a point. To a point, lemanot is to a point is rabbinical usage. It's not in Tanakh. In Tanakh, limanot is to count. That's where we have the word minyan from. That's a rabbinical word also. Minyan is something that you can count. It's called davar shebe minyan. That's where we get minyan, because you count 10 people. That's why it's a minyan. You mean you get the quorum. So nimnu vegamru, what do you count in order to reach a decision? They counted and they arrived at a decision. So what did they count? Yeah. No. I had one extra? Okay.
Yeah.
So what did they count? What do people count in order to come to a decision? Votes. They voted. It was a vote. Meaning there was not a simple thing that everybody agreed on. Some people, they didn't know what to do with it. That's an issue by itself. That what we take today for granted, that only 3 major or capital sins that for them one should not sacrifice his life. It wasn't that simple in the past. There was a period where people believed that you should die rather than commit any sin. That was the approach, because in most cases you really didn't have this kind of confrontation. You didn't have the Greeks who would come in, or the Romans who would try to force you to transgress any prohibition. And the other things that we usually associate with saving someone on Shabbat has to do with medicine, right? Like emergency situation. Pikuach nefesh, right? So all these emergency situations were not that common at the time, unless it was a disaster. And then people usually took action according to what they felt necessary. But when someone was sick on Shabbat, you wouldn't rush to call the doctor, because the doctor couldn't do much at the time. So, okay, that could have waited for Motzei Shabbat. So they only ran into a situation, a crisis, where they had to decide whether you sacrifice your life or not, at the Greek period, when the Greeks realized, because of several incidents, they put one and one together, and they came to the conclusion that the Jews don't fight back on Shabbat. So Shabbat is the perfect time to attack those sitting ducks. And after a couple of attacks like that, the Rabbi said, okay, this cannot continue like that. We have to rewrite halakha. An issue that was never addressed. The Torah never says anything about what comes first, your life or the observance of the mitzvot. So there was a new concept that we had to deal with. So, but bottom line, what we see from this whole story is that the rabbis are not against elective suicide when you are cornered by the enemy. So why did they write off the story of Masada? What's the difference between Masada, the people who are besieged by the Romans in Masada, and the boys and girls on the ship?
The kids on the ship didn't have any other option. They didn't have an option to fight back.
Mm-hmm. So okay, it's a good point, which connects to the question of how did the war of Masada start?
Are they referring
in the first place?
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure the 400 boys and girls that killed themselves.
Yeah.
Are they referring to this in Masada, or is this similar? Are you?
They're in sea. They're on a ship. Completely.
Okay, so how are you comparing this though to?
No,
Masada?
I'm saying if this was incorporated into Talmudic literature, which seems even a little fake. I mean, it's a rewriting or rendition of a true story. It didn't happen exactly like that. So why abandon the real story and use a story like that?
Oh, are you saying that something similar happened in Masada?
And yet it's not mentioned exactly.
Okay, I understand.
So, but I think what Carolyn said, this is the direction. The kids on the ship did not put themselves in this situation, and they couldn't fight back. They were captured at war. The warriors of Masada had a choice. They could just leave the fortress.
They could run.
They could run away. It was their choice to wage war against the Romans. And as a matter of fact, what they used to do is to sneak out of Masada and set fire to the fields around the of the villages in order to incite people to join the rebellion. And the Romans, and this is where they infuriate the Romans. The Romans would execute people, and the Rabbi said, "This is not the right thing to do." So I think the answer is that elective suicide is allowed where you have no other option. But when you have an option, in the case of Masada was just stop fight. What would have happened if they would come down from the mountain and dress like farmers and infiltrate into the local populations? The Romans wouldn't know who they are, right? This happened in recent history in a country called Iraq. I remember when I heard the news of the invasion of the Second Gulf War, and they said that the Iraqi army is disintegrated. I said, this spells trouble. What do you mean that the army disintegrated? It means that the soldiers went home, changed into civil clothes, and now you don't know who they are. And until now, what they call insurgency is really people who are still loyal to Saddam or to other people. They could have done that. They chose not to do so. So the rabbis do not glorify Masada. It's only in the new Israeli narrative that Masada is glorified. And that, unlike when we spoke yesterday about Zionism, that can be questionable. That can be questionable because they... but then we're going to politics, so I don't want to do that.
How important in this chapter 13 is the shame?
The shame is kalon, is a euphemism for prostitution.
But what I mean is that is it more important that they didn't have another option, or that the penalty of their capture, or the penalty of their capture?
Right. So we don't know. That's how they describe it. It seems to suggest that if they would have known for sure that they are only going to be slaves, maybe they wouldn't be allowed to do that. But the shame of it's like almost a desecration of God's name, so they're allowed to do it. Yeah.
But you said the rabbis are not glorifying Masada.
Not Masada,
But
definitely.
they seem to be agreeing with the action.
When it's necessary, but they thought that Masada was not necessary. Yeah.
See, I see similarity in both stories, because the 960 Jews that killed themselves. I'm just looking at the amount in Masada. Maybe thought that they were going to be forced to believe in other gods and follow
true.
this idea, and so therefore that justifies them killing themselves. And also,
No, of course they're right.
With this story, the 400 boys and girls, who knows what kind of things that they would have had to do had they had lived and not kill themselves. I mean, I see it that way.
No, of course there are similarities. Those are the similarities, but and I agree with that. Where they diverge from each other is at the point of choice. The people, and especially maybe they chose of all situations, people on a boat, on a ship. Because on a ship you have nowhere you
Not just people, boys and girls.
Boys and girls.
That are usually considered more helpless.
Yes, they're helpless.
So that's how I think
Interesting.
rabbis are really setting it apart from Masada.
Right.
Masada, you had soldiers,
Right.
for the most part, that could be prepared to fight.
Right.
To fight back.
So this is a different type of heroism. It's a heroism of the helpless. There's nothing you could do, but you could make your captor lose you completely.
In other words, I think I'm hearing the rabbi saying, Masada, nice, not Kiddush Hashem.
Yes.
Let me give you an example of Kiddush Hashem.
Yes.
A real example.
Yes, so that's why where Stephanie points out the similarities and we see the differences, this is how when you lay them over each other. That's why it's important also to always look at things this is one of the contexts that you look at, that if you look for one like an element in the story, what is the theme? Elective suicide. Let me look for all the stories that I find in Talmud. Let me look at all the versions. This is one way to do it. Yes, Shir.
So my question was, is this actually like Kiddush Hashem, or is it just avoiding Chilul Hashem? Because I find it hard to, a mass suicide is not Kiddush Hashem. A mass suicide is a great tragedy. But it's
not according to this one.
Avoid Chilul Hashem.
Not according to this story in this context. It is Kiddush Hashem. It is. It did do the right thing. It's glorified.
Yeah, but you can do the right thing without it being Kiddush Hashem.
Sharing the wolf's tongue, so that's not just, okay, you're avoiding, but you're actually going to be rewarded.
Well, rewarded for making the only choice that you
Getting Olam Haba is the greatest reward. Once and this was something that was definitely promoted in rabbinic period, because you couldn't expect any more reward in this world. So the Department of Rewards and merit was moved to the upper floor where no access is denied to everyone.
Right.
And,
the
nobody.
department.
Right. Yeah, it's propaganda department. You could say that. So in the original story, the whole thing is about the destruction of the temple. There's whole discussion in Masechet Gitin. And wait, a little bit. Is this one Zion? Where are we?
I think it's just propaganda. I don't agree with it.
It is. It is propaganda. I said, but they're talking about. By the way, just before that, they're speaking about Vespasian or Aspasianus in the Talmud, who killed in Betar 400,000, and some say 4 million. 400 ribo. Okay. So yeah, they definitely in the context in the Talmud they bring it as a story of Kiddush Hashem. Okay, but yes, Caroline.
In the Midrashim that we looked at regarding war and peace, we're not seeing, is there any sanction for fighting back?
Not
the rabbinic, the Midrashim are clear that the Jewish community is not to
not to fight
make
back.
noises, not to fight
Not
back.
to fight back.
That given in these situations, the only option is suicide or hiding.
Yeah, if there was another version in a Midrash, most probably at a certain point it would have been censored, because you live in a continuous state of subjugation. You never have this independence. So even, and I'll give you an example. There's a poem for Slichot in the Sephardic tradition. It's called, the title is Elecha Hashem Nasati Einai. I lift my eyes up to you. Elecha Hashem Nasati Einai. So and the refrain, the rhyme is always Daled Yud Kaf Decha. So the first was Devarim Lakati Rabash Dati Ubati Adecha Gavru Yagunutai Bekadecha, and so Begadecha Yedidecha. The whole thing goes with there's one exception. There's one exception where they say, "Bring us back, gather our diaspora, our people from exile," and then they end the verse, "Uchakedem tenahel diglei hamonecha," and you will lead, tenahel, lead, kekedem, as it was in antiquity, diglei, the flags of Hamonecha, which means multitudes.
Your multitude?
Or multitudes. So I didn't use the pronouns. You will lead the flags of your multitudes as it was in antiquity. And it bothered me, why is it that this one line deviates? You have 22 rhymes, so 11, because 2 letters in each. So 11 stanzas, they all end up with Decha Dalet, right? And here you have Nun Yud Kaf. So that really is an exception. I mean, it seems like deliberate. It's true that when you have a cold in your nasal, the Nun will sound like a Dalet, like a Bodecha. But I don't think that's what they meant. So I looked around until I found the original version, which is Diglei Gedudecha, which is perfect, right? Fits with the Decha Decha Decha, the whole thing.
What does it mean?
So this is the original. This was changed. Why was it changed? Gedudecha in Hebrew means troops. So at some point, the author didn't think about that, but at some point someone says, if the government reads through our Siddur and it sees that we pray for Hashem to lead the flags of the troops again, then it will be considered incitement for rebellion. So even like one word in a liturgy, tucked somewhere in the Siddur, read once a year, it was scary for some people that they changed that.
Good.
Yeah. Another example, the song Deo Ikra, right? It's a very popular song. So, in one of the versions of the poem, which is, I don't know what was the original. Now, I was thought as I think the original one, anyway, at one line it says, "V'gam deruch pura b'toch Batzra," meaning we ask Hashem to bring destruction to Botzra, which is in Bavel, in Babylonia. "V'gam Bavel asher gavra," and also put down or destroy Babylonia, who overcame us. So the Jews anywhere else but Iraq use this version, but Jews in Iraq switch the word Bavel for the word Edom, which stands for Rome. Again, for the same reason. So there is great sensitivity, and we know that some midrashim were expunged from the collected text, we know that a lot of stuff went missing from the Talmud, especially the paragraphs that dealt with Christianity. Now we have full versions, and you can. I think there are books that could show you all the omissions from the Talmud because of Christianity. So I think that the same thing happened here. That if they had this kind of Midrash that promoted resistance, it was at one point censored and cleaned up. Okay.
So, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
So clearly, like, having a sovereignty, having Israel now changes our narrative.
Yes.
But there were periods of resistance and insurrection prior to the founding of the state of Israel, such as Warsaw, for example. I'm not.
Yeah. Only during war. The only.
But there had to, so within the literature it was censored, but there were historical episodes where groups did fight that version.
Not so much, except for what I told you. The Jews of who lived during the rise of Islam, the Jews of the Arabian Peninsula had armies. The Jews of the Maghreb in Morocco had this kind of reason. Rabbi Shmuel Halevi, who was a poet who lived in Spain and also rabbi, a scholar, politician, was the commander of the armies of the Khalif.
He was?
Yeah, he was a general. Yeah, one of his poems he wrote in the battlefield because he didn't have time to pray Minha, so he composed a short poem instead and read it. Yeah, we had that. But after this, I translated a while ago a responsa by Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Toledano, who was born in Israel and served in different communities in North Africa and the Middle East in the early 1920s, and then he ended up in Egypt before he came to Israel and became with the first government. He was the minister of religious affairs. So he writes in the 1920s, late 1920s, after the pogroms in Hebron, that it is very sad that the Jewish mentality became a mentality of subjugation, as if, he writes, as if we have to really make sure that all the curses and all the promises that are written in the Tanakh are going to be fulfilled in us. He said those are deterrents, those are admonitions. They don't have to happen. You don't have to. He says you have to be careful, but you don't have to put yourself down. You don't have to play the role of the subject in such a convincing way. You have to stand up for your right. And the sad thing about that he's writing in 1929, 1930, and he says we must include in the curriculum in the yeshivot self-defense, using weapons, etc. Nobody listens to him. And if they would have, you can imagine that within 15 years, from 1920 to 1930, or 9 years to 1939, people would have a different attitude. The attitude was very, very submissive, just accept it. This is what God wanted. Yeah. So you could say that we have new Midrash, the new. Yeah. One of the most fascinating midrashim, I think, if you look at modern literature, but unfortunately I don't think that there's so much translated to English. Some of the most fascinating poets of modern Israel is Uri Tzvi Greenberg. Uri, U-R-I, Tzvi Greenberg. I taught a course on modern Jewish history with several classes just based on his poems. And he's very powerful. He's also like Agnon, has a mastery of the Hebrew language and all the rabbinical sources. So, and he writes with such passion that I know a couple of weeks ago I was about to give a drash, and I looked at a poem that I was looking for something, and I lingered on another poem that he writes about his father, who perished in the hall because I got so emotional I couldn't, keep on reading. It's just like it grabs you. So let me see what we have in. I'm sure there's something online. I recommend. Come on. Where we? Yeah. So yeah, you have they write Zvi as ZVI, and poems found in translation. Yeah, there are a couple list of translated poems.
Yeah, there are a couple.
There are a couple over there. Yeah. So okay, look it up. If not, just keep on learning Hebrew until you could decipher them. It's worth it. It's like someone said once about Tanakh. The Hebraists of medieval times, during the Renaissance, there was a movement among Christians to study Hebrew. It later on came to America with the founding fathers, and there's so much Hebrew everywhere, in that early culture. But one of them said it's worth it to study Hebrew for 70 years in order to be able to read one psalm in the original language. And I second that. I didn't study for 7 years, but I think it's true. It's so much powerful in the Hebrew. Okay, so let us now move into. Okay, we did times of war. Let's conclude with something more. I don't know if it's relaxing, but in different from a different field. And this is a story that originally appears in the Talmud. And also in Avot de Rabbi Natan, which is like the extended version of Masechet Avot. It's page 643. And let's read just the English. Now you have the Hebrew on the other side. It's section number 27. Who would like to read that? It's a long story.
I can read English.
Okay. And by the way, you could read the whole story. But if people at a certain point want to make a comment, it's okay.
Is this from Legend of the Jews?
Yes. No. The Book of Legends.
That's fine.
Yeah. Our master. Yeah.
Our masters taught a man should at all times be pliant as a reed and not hard as a cedar. A story is told of Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, who was once returning from his teacher's house in Migdal Eder. He was riding leisurely on his donkey by the lake shore, and felt greatly elated and thoroughly satisfied with himself because he had studied much Torah. Well, in this mood, he chanced upon an exceedingly ugly man who greeted him. "Peace be upon you, my master." Rabbi Shimon did not return the greeting, but instead said to him, "You worthless creature, how ugly you are. Are all the people of your city as ugly as you?" The man replied, "What can I do about it? Go tell the craftsman who made me, how ugly is the vessel you have made." No sooner did Rabbi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Shimon, realize that he had done wrong than he got down from the donkey and, prostrating himself before the man, said to him, "I apologize to you, please forgive me." The man replied, "I will not forgive you until you go to the craftsman who made me and tell him, how ugly is the vessel you have made." Rabbi Elazar followed him until he reached the man's city. And the people of the city came out to meet Rabbi Elazar, greeting him with the words, "Peace be upon you, my master, my teacher." The man asked them, "Who are you addressing as my master, my master?" They replied, "The man who is walking behind you." At that the man said, "If he is the master, may there be no more like him in Israel." When the people asked him why, he replied, "This is how the master behaved to me." They said to him, "Nevertheless forgive him, for he is a man greatly learned in the Torah." The man replied, "For your sakes I forgive him, but only on condition that he not make a habit of such behavior." Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon, immediately entered the house to study and preached on the subject. A man should at all times be pliant as a reed and not hard as a cedar.
Okay.
I got lost in some ferments there.
Okay, so comment on that. Where did you feel that you got lost?
When they entered the city.
Why? They entered the city, and the people came to greet the rabbi, and they called him rabbi, and the man said, "Who's the rabbi?" And they said, "This is the rabbi."
Man who then helped-
Right. The ugly man said, "Who's the rabbi?" And I said, "This Rabbi Lazar is the rabbi."
The ugly guy.
And he says, "No, he's not a rabbi."
Here, that's so nice.
They say we shouldn't have that many. We should have more like. We should not have more like him. And then they said, "Please forgive him." Yeah. So comments.
Not the ugly man is the
Okay.
rabbi.
No.
Lazar is the rabbi.
Yeah.
And so this ugly man is the one who said,
Yeah.
"He is the master, may there be no more like him."
Right. So what?
Oh.
Yeah. What is your
That
first?
makes more sense.
Oh.
So confusing.
Oh, that was the other way around? No.
Confusing.
The man said, if this Rabbi Elazar is a rabbi, may we have no more like
This
him.
is rude.
Yes. And then the people say, why are you saying that? And why? I'm surprised they didn't stone him right away. And he said, this is what happened. This is how he behaved with me. And the people agree with the man, but they say, please forgive the rabbi. And he said, I will forgive him, but he should not, it doesn't mean that he could keep behaving like that.
So I think the irony maybe that I'm noticing, if I'm getting it, is that Rabbi Elazar wasn't teaching wasn't teaching about his own behavior. He was teaching about the man's response.
Okay. Does everybody agree with that?
I don't know, 'cause it's just like, it's like the man should not be firm in his anger at me. He should be forgiving. No.
No, he's talking about himself.
Are you sure?
That's how I want to, that's what I want to think, but I feel like it's not. I don't know.
I felt that Rabbi Lazar refers to the men, like Eric. On the other hand, the authors of the book, Bialik and Rovnitsky, in their commentary says that Rabbi Lazar was not the one. But this is not about Rabbi Lazar's behavior. It's not being flexible or rigid. It's about being not just being rude. How would you define his shortcoming? What is his shortcoming?
Being judgmental.
Judgment, superficial. He's superficial and judgmental.
Questioning God.
It's questioning God. So now explain that. What is the response to the men to Rabbi Elazar when he says, "Go talk to my Creator"?
Go talk to God. I didn't make myself ugly. This is how I was born. I have a
So
problem. I take it up with God.
okay. So how does the man look at himself? How does this man consider himself?
I am
Maybe
made
he's
as I
ugly.
was meant
Selling
to, I am made as I
Yeah.
was meant to be made.
Okay, two answers. He looks at it as ugly, meaning is accepting. You see it as a statement of acceptance. This is who I am. What can I do? Caroline says it's different. What are you saying?
I would say that the man is saying, I was created B'Tselem Elohim the same way everybody else was created.
And where do you take this cue from? Is it a specific word in the text?
Craftsman?
Craftsman.
Okay.
I think it's a keyword.
But he
Yeah.
says, what can I do about it?
He doesn't say.
Meaning, he doesn't say I'm not ugly.
No, umay say. He says so. What does he say when he says go talk to God? He says he doesn't say I have the same complaint with God. He says go talk to the craftsman. So the craftsman is an interesting. Remember we spoke about it yesterday. The word Stephanie brought it up, right? The word
What is the
yotzer.
word?
Yeah, you can use
In the biblical, it's yotzer. Right? When we say yotzer or hoshech, God is the yotzer. The yotzer also in Hebrew means a potter. Literally, the potter is called yotzer keli heres. It appears in Yehezkel, in Yirmiyahu, Beta Yotzer, the house of the potter. And until today, you have in Yerushalayim a craftsmanship festival in the same place where Yirmiyahu was told to go to Beta Yotzer, and it's called Beta Yotzer, the house of the craftsman. So Yotzer is a potter, and why is Yotzer a potter? Because it's the classic example of giving shape to a lump. You take a lump of clay and you form it into a vessel. So the concept of tzura.
You know, you can make that cut. Okay,
Even
so
though the word tzura, it doesn't appear in
so
Tanakh.
taking it out of
It's
context.
form. Yes,
Put-
you're saying?
I was going to say, like, you know, just like these rabbis take everything out of context, you can say, oh, well, there's a connection between Yotzer or Bria, creation, and this idea of that God created us, and then this idea of God created us in the image of God.
Yes.
And you can connect those two. Just like, I mean, that would make more sense to me than taking Song of Songs and connecting that with that, whatever that was yesterday.
Midrash has.
It's a different game.
Right.
You get points in
Right.
the game for quoting Shira Shirim
It's like
instead
Pokemon.
of Torah.
Yeah.
No, but that's the way you have to think about it. Because it's not, they're not
Very
doing
good.
it based on
Yeah. When I said, do you like?
rules. They have their own rules. And you
Yeah.
get more points if you quote from Shira Shirim.
Right. You like poetry, you like fiction, you like whatever you like. You can look at a genre and say, I like this author, I don't like this author, right? And in this case, you could say, I connect to this style, and I don't connect to this style. Here we have what we call the biographic Haggadah, by the way. It's not really based on a text, even though biblical text is presented in the story, but it's really more about moral and ethics, but it's presented through a biographic Haggadah. The Yotzer is the biblical word. The word he uses is uman, but it definitely refers to the Yotzer. So I think if I will pick on what Carolyn suggested, what the man says is, and like you commented, you're being superficial, because if God created us in His form, but our form is different than each other, then it must be that this is not the form of God. This is the depth of what the man is saying. It's a very deep concept.
Where is the Hebrew for this?
On the back. On the back. It's actually in brackets. So
I don't think that the man actually expected this rabbi to go and have that conversation with God. Like, I think that it was more of a wake-up call for the rabbi, and by saying, go tell the craftsman who made me, he wasn't actually asking him to go do that.
Yes.
It's metaphorical. And the other thing that strikes me, is that in the beginning it says that the rabbi was elated because he had studied so much Torah, and then he goes and embarrasses this man. So it's interesting because to me that means just being learned isn't enough, but practicing, practice what you preach, practice what you read.
So this is sort of,
So I don't know if that's like...
So let's look in the Hebrew. It's a little bit lost in translation. In the third line in the Hebrew, it says, V'haita da'ato gasa alav mipnei shelamad Torah harbe. Gasa alav. Okay, so gas in Hebrew means not refined.
Coarse.
Not refined?
Coarse.
Yeah, I know, but it's coarse, rude.
So it's not really a good translation.
Yes, it's not. In this case, it's missing. But I'm saying not refined because it's not only coarse, it's not just physical. In general.
Coarse also means having to do with attitude.
Okay.
You can call a person's attitude
Okay.
coarse.
So, except...
Suggesting like untreated, vulgar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the atogasa is a vague term.
His manners were coarse.
Okay. So is his course at that point, right? And why is it like he? In a way, we could say he dropped his guards. He has usually he maintained a certain balance or a certain perspective, but now that he learned so much Torah, v'samach simcha gdola, and he was extremely joyous. So in this spiritual state of mind, elation, but it brings negative results.
Yeah, it's like his ego was inflated.
Yes.
Something like that, because he was so learned in Torah, well, he's not so nice.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of like when everybody goes to like rabbinical school the first year, and they get like all crazy about halakha. Maybe it's only in places where most of the people are young, and they get like super traditional, and then they like go and tell everyone else that they have to be like more refined in their halakhic practice.
That's why I guess that's why I use the term, because I'm working a lot with with this crowd, and the word refined comes back, over and over and over again.
Yeah, but I know what you mean, like they get a sense of like.
It happens that people go spend a year in Israel and they come back and they turn their house upside down. Come to the parents, what you're doing is I did it to my parents. Not after a year in issue. I did it to them. I said, we should buy this, and I Sorry. It's not my fault. It's a process. No, it's really a process of brainwashing. You don't realize.
What if he didn't know? What if the rabbi wasn't learned? Maybe he was book smart, learned in Torah, and grew up right in a yeshiva, but wasn't learned in other aspects like of common sense. And maybe he said, he was just noticing like, wow, like, oh, what a pretty flower. Oh, you're not so attractive. Sort of like a statement, and he didn't realize the repercussions until the gentleman notified him. Like,
right, I didn't even realize.
That's probably not. You know what I mean? There's people that are so bright and learned when it comes to books,
Yeah, like
but in reality, they have no common sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
None.
Yeah, but I don't think that to say that he was off this like emotional spectrum would get him off the hook. But what Stephanie's saying, no, I understand. There are people like that. But right, he's not just thinking that. A lot of people think, pass judgments on others, on their appearance or behavior or whatever. But to tell someone in his face, and not only that, another thing is missing here. When he says, "You worthless creature," worthless creature is not a good word. In Hebrew, it's reka. Reka is empty. You're an empty what?
And you chose this because why?
Me?
To end on a happy
No. That's not the last one. We have one more. No, I chose this to show you that the rabbis could be critical of each other.
Yeah.
Because the one who's being judged here is Rabbi Elazar ben Shimon. That where we seek several things. Let's read the story from the beginning, see what happens. So he goes to learn Torah, and he's very joyous. V'ata da'ato gasa alav. So instead of, we could say that just like the rabbi said that one can be tested by the way he behaves when he's drunk. Adam nikar bekiso.
Oh, it's horrible.
He's drunk with power, and believe me, I've seen it more than once. The people that are drunk with power, even if it's small amounts of power relative to their position, could treat people rudely.
Yeah, that's where the evil comes in.
Exactly. So there's a major failure. The Torah was supposed to make you a better person. Instead, it made you that person that can hurl insults at others without even realizing that. That's a criticism of his Torah. What does he do right away when he comes without the city? The end of the story is miyad nichnas bet midrash, as if I have to relearn and reassess my Torah. My Torah is wrong. Whatever I learned is not good. Maybe also the fact that he's riding on a donkey, right? He's riding a donkey and metayel al sfat nahar. It's like the world is mine. I control the world. He's at leisure. He's a prince. He's a prince of Torah.
He's looking at this lowly servant on the
right. And in the Hebrew, it's v'ayta da'ato gasa alav mipnei shelamat Torah harbe. It's really, it's very selfish, very self-centered. Maybe even narcissistic because he's by the shore. Maybe he's looking at this reflection in the lake. He says, "Wow, you're really handsome. Now that you've studied so much Torah, you look amazing."
Well, and that's already setting up an opposition to Pirkei Avot, where it says that don't applaud yourself for learning a lot of Torah.
Yes,
that's what you're meant to do.
Right. You learned a lot. You didn't do anything. That's your purpose. But interesting. Over there it says kilechach notzarta from the word yotzer, same term of the potter.
Right.
You were crafted. No, it is uman. Yeah, uman. I think there's another version that says yotzer, but uman is just the vernacular of the rabbis for yotzer. So he is now being judged by the rabbis who tell us the story. And how he could address this man, what he calls him an empty vessel. So with the same element of the potter, when he calls him an empty vessel,
so that's what he's saying, not.
It's exactly the opposite. What?
So he's not saying you worthless creature. He's saying you empty vessel.
You empty vessel. That's the That's the accurate translation, and it's important because see the irony. He looks at the superficial and judges on the internal. He says, "You are empty." How can you tell? How can you tell that this man is empty? Do you know what he thinks, who he is?
Because he looks coarse.
Because right, or
He thinks coarse.
he thinks coarse, and then he sees the coarseness in others. I guess.
What's the word for empty that he uses? The Hebrew
Reka,
word?
Resh Yud Kuf Aleph.
Resh,
So he
Yud.
just says
Kuf
Reka.
Aleph. Yeah. Reka. Kama mechuar oto aish. But he doesn't stop there. He says, Sheme kol b'nei ircha mechuarim kamocha. Are all the people of the city as ugly as you?
So which word is ugly?
Mechuar.
Yeah, okay.
Also rabbinical.
Where is that?
In the Hebrew, it's in the sixth line, seventh line.
I like it because Rabbi Elazar immediately apologizes.
Right.
How many people do that? Like you were this
Right.
basically just pointed out to you that you're being a pompous pig.
Right. Yeah.
And like the first thing you do is say like, yes, I'm being a pompous pig,
Yes.
and I must prostrate myself in front of you because
Right.
you are wise to teach me
There's a
such.
blessing, and I don't know if it's probably post this, but there is a blessing upon seeing a strange or ugly person.
Right. Yes. That eventually was kicked out of our.
Retinue.
Yeah. You say Baruch Meshaneh Briot.
Where is that one?
Blessed he who changes the creatures or
So this one translates
created diversity. Sorry.
You know, you're not, Torah just to know Torah isn't worth anything unless you can apply it
Right.
to your daily interactions with others.
Right.
That's very good. That's-
Midrash mevi lidei ma'aseh. Your theoretical interpretation must bring you to practical solutions. That's why when a rabbi or religious person is caught for corruption or sexual abuse or whatever it is, and everybody says, "Look what this religious man did," the rabbi, and then the religious community says, "Oh, you're anti-Semites. You just try to single us out. Look how many other criminals." Says, okay, we don't expect them to behave in a moral way. I mean, we expect people to behave generally in a moral way. But you, the rabbi, the religious person who preach and teach and say that this is how you have to behave, and you don't follow, this is the problem. So what you share, what you commented about the immediate reaction of Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Shimon, immediate apology. He gets off the donkey. And he prostrates himself. What does he do? He brings himself from the height of his physical position, and he goes down to the ground to put himself below him, and maybe also to connect back to the earth from which he was created. And the reason I think that he reacted so dramatically is because the man really got him. The answer was not you're an arrogant you're what arrogant person you are, or who do you think you are? What can I do? I'm ugly. No, he said, God created me, and God created you, and what you see is not the image of God. The image of God is inside us, and you know nothing about me. And since he gave him such a wise answer, he realized that this is truly a man of great wisdom, and that. He wouldn't do it now to anyone, but especially not to this man.
I think the rabbi just didn't know any better. I mean, I think that's the only just reason as to.
Yeah, but
that
now
would
he
make
will know
sense.
better, I think.
No, now he
Yeah.
does. I just think it's a learning lesson in which maybe, in life, I think sometimes we say things that we shouldn't say, and we do the wrong thing, and sometimes we're not aware of it.
Yes.
And until somebody notifies us saying, that really wasn't right what you said, and this made me feel a certain way, or, being honest and open and saying that you really hurt me with what you had just said, and it really affected me, and and I think that that's important to learn that lesson, in which I think it happens. It happens every day.
So we also have a lesson in communication, right? So it's amazing. Like this story, if you say why I chose this story, because it really illuminates many different aspects. We learn of how the way the story is presented, about the values of the Torah and so on. So and communication, yes.
It would seem that in the middle section of the story, it's the ugly man who is being inflexible as the rabbi attempts to apologize. And
Yes.
Here's where I get this from. Because he says, "Eini mocher lecha ad shetelech le'umad she'asani v'tomel." Right? So I will not forgive you until you go. Not you pray, but until you go to your Creator.
Right. Like until you die.
Until you die.
Yes, that's
So
possible.
I'll never forgive you.
Right.
And
Right.
it's the town that convinces him, oh,
Right.
come on.
So now-
he's trying to make good here, right?
Right. So let's look at the townspeople. So now the story gets interesting. I mean, it was interesting. They get the Ayamet El Haraf. So the man now leads the way, and Rabbi Elazar follows him. And then he reaches the man's city. And now the people of the city come out to meet and greet Rabbi Eliezer. And they greet him, peace be upon you, Rabbi, Rabbi, Mori, Mori. And the man says, who are you calling Rabbi? And they said, this man. And he says, no, he's not. He should not. We shouldn't have many like him. And they say, why do you say that? And he tells them the whole story. In the whole story, there's something about the people of the city. Right?
Oh, is everybody as ugly as you?
Right. He says, you don't know this man. You call him rabbi. Meanwhile, he passed judgment on you before he even saw you. He saw me and passed judgment on me, but you didn't even see. So that's why the man wants, he wants Rabbi Elazar. Just like you say, that's somebody that he wants him to deal with his actions, not only with the immediate results, but with the intermediate, with the long-term consequences. You, offhandedly, you said, "Oh, what about the people of your city? You never saw them. You don't know who they are. Come, let me show. Now let's talk about them, right? This is like bringing the offense from obscurity to the open, and now you have to deal with it.
But also, I think it teaches the importance of words, of being. What you say is really imperative, and it can affect one's life very, very deeply.
Mm-hmm.
Like just words in and of itself, the way what you say to people.
Yeah, so it's about bullying also.
Bullying.
It's about the bullying with the words.
It affects your whole life.
Yeah.
It affects your entire life, affects every day. And those children can be very, very mean. That's
a good story, by the way, to study with children when you teach bullying. And let them understand because especially boys do not understand the impact.
You could have just left it at boys do not understand.
No. They don't.
No, but it's worse because
Sorry, you
girls
guys are
understand.
Yeah, we are.
They do it anyway.
Yeah.
And
No,
they
in
do
that
it
book that I meant,
intentionally.
right? At that book that I mentioned, Shira, in the book that I mentioned, Raising
Guys don't
Cain.
understand what girls do, and they
Guys
do it
don't
on
care. They
purpose.
No.
call each other names.
No, we don't
No.
have the capacity.
When you look at the frequency of assaults between what girls do to girls or to boys and what boys do, it's not the same. You have to know deliberately that you want to do that, and boys are in most cases just clueless. The psychologists in this book, Raising Cain, are pressing a bunch of boys to understand why bullying is not right, and they ask them, "How do you know? Why are you saying that?" I said, "No, he likes it." I said, "No, he doesn't like it because, it led to." He says, "How do you know that what you're doing is not right? How do you know that you crossed the line?" And they're completely dumbfounded. They have no idea. And then one says, when someone cries,
When he starts bleeding.
oh yes, when they cry, it means they're not happy. Really,
Cry, so how would you ever know if someone's
What?
not happy? Boys are taught not to cry very early.
Yeah, so it takes time until you figure out that they're there. Right, it's true. Right, that's what I'm saying. It's a great story to analyze and discuss. And I think in general, when we spoke about Midrashim, you could look at Sefer HaAgadah as a good source, especially under those categories of character traits and all that. You will find maybe one in 2 or 3 pages because there are a lot of other material, but there's a lot of good things there. So anyway, eventually the man forgives Rabbi Elazar, but he says, do not make it a habit, right? Shelo yeragil la'asot ken, meaning, so one of 2 things. It's possible that the man knew that Rabbi Elazar did it in the past. That's why I say you have a habit of doing that. And that's also a key component of apology. You have to accept an apology only when it's sincere. And we know we were told as kids, when we were taught teshuvah, if someone apologizes, you have to accept it. And then they would tell the person who was offended, they told us that we have to apologize, and then they said that the person who was offended must not be too tough. And if the other person apologized 3 times and you rejected him, it's not his fault anymore, right? So we would go to a friend and say, like in Hebrew, ani mitnatzel, right? I apologize. 3 times, goodbye. Okay, I did my share. It doesn't work, right? But when you grow up, you realize it's much more complicated. You have interactions with friends and family and colleagues and employees and all that. And someone does something bad, and they come and say, I apologize. And you forgive them, and then they do it again. And you forgive them, and then they do it again. So what do? Exactly. You try not to. You either you say it or you disengage. You try to not be in contact with that person because you know it's going to happen again. So it's not a simple decision, but also alluded to in this story. Okay, so I'm going to take a short break, and then we'll conclude.